All right. Hello. Welcome back to another Trek Talk. I apologize for the delay. All right. So today I'm going to be looking at episode 18 in production order, Squire of Gothos. Definitely a fan favorite, I think. So this episode is written by Paul Schneider and directed by Don McDougall. And as usual, I'll be reading from Mark Cushman's book, These Are the Voyages, for behind the scenes information. So this comes from the TV Guide, January 7th, 1967. The Enterprise crew become playthings in the hands of Trelane, a powerful being who is using his human visitors as toys. Kirk, who Trelane sees as a leader among predators, must barter for the release of ship and crew. The price is his own life. The Squire of Gothos presents a study of human behavior through the eyes of a self-gratifying narcissistic alien child. The writer later acknowledged that this was a subtle anti-war story, mocking prejudice, aggressiveness, territorialism, and violence by seeing these negative human characteristics mimicked by an immature boy wanting to play soldier. The Squire of Gothos is fast-paced entertainment, both clever and surprising. Star Trek often examines the human experience. Usually, this allows us to see ourselves through the eyes of aliens such as Mr. Spock. Here, we are confronted with the dark and violent past humans have to live down. Trelane sees humans as killers, and this intrigues him. In the end, Kirk demonstrates that mankind is capable of greater things than our detractors would believe. I don't know. I'm not really sold on that angle of it, but I'll get into that later. This is the magic of Star Trek. In the turbulent 1960s, Americans, and especially America's youth, were desperate for a sign that we could survive and that there was a reason for us to do so. Kirk is the spokesman as Star Trek repeatedly made the positive argument in favor of mankind. The kids could have fun watching this too, and they did. And yeah, it is definitely a fun episode. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get into it here. So the Enterprise is delivering supplies to Beta 6 when they come across a planet in an area of space where no planet is known to exist. They don't have time to stop and explore the planet, so Kirk orders Sulu to veer away from it, but then Sulu abruptly disappears. And then Kirk disappears as well. Spock puts the Enterprise into orbit around this planet, and they spend hours scanning it trying to find Kirk and Sulu to no avail. The planet's atmosphere and temperature are not suitable for humans, so if they are on the planet, it seems unlikely they could be alive. Nevertheless, Lieutenant DeSalle and Dr. McCoy want to beam down to search for them. But really, since they have no idea where on the planet they are to begin with, going down there and looking on foot on an Earth-sized planet seems kind of like a pretty pointless endeavor. Then they receive basically a text message reading greetings and felicitations, followed by hip hip hurrah, tally ho. Spock orders DeSalle, McCoy, and a geophysicist named Yeager to beam down to the origin point of the message to search for Kirk and Sulu. They'll arrive to find a pleasant Earth like atmosphere, but also discover their communicators aren't working and they can't contact the ship. Then they find a large stone structure, which they enter and find a dwelling decorated in a kind of European, I don't know, what would you call this, Baroque kind of style? I'm not sure. There's an alcove with what appears to be a salt sucker, the monster from the man trap. And then they see Kirk and Sulu in some sort of suspended animation. McCoy notes that they don't even register on his tricorder. Then they hear music and they see a man playing, I guess this is a harpsichord, I believe that's what it's called. And he notes that Kirk and Sulu make fine display pieces, but then releases them and welcomes them all to his planet, which he calls Gothos. He introduces himself as General Trelane, retired. He apologizes for the manner in which he brought them to his home, but says he couldn't resist getting a closer look at them. He tells them that he's been looking in on the doings of Earth for some time, noting that he didn't think humans were capable of traveling so far from their planet. He tells them that he's made Earth's culture a hobby of his and he wishes to learn more about Earth and humans from them, particularly about their wars and conquests. Kirk informs Trelane that their mission is peaceful and they don't wage wars of conquest anymore. But Trelane rather blithely dismisses that notion, saying, like, basically, oh, yeah, yeah, sure you don't. Trelane tries to, or I'm sorry, DeSalle tries to stun Trelane with a phaser, but Trelane freezes him in place, just like Kirk and Sulu were. Then he takes the phaser from DeSalle and tests it out, phasering a couple of his display pieces. He then tells them that he and others like him have, quote, perfected a system by which matter can be transformed into energy and back again, as well as altering its form and shape. Kirk then tells the others that it's time to go, but Trelane refuses to let them leave. Hello, Lord Thoth. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for stopping by. So Trelane refuses to let them leave, and to drive the point home, he transports Kirk out into the toxic atmosphere momentarily as a bit of an object lesson before warning them to behave, or else he'll become very angry. On the Enterprise, they've detected the area where Trelane's dwelling is located and plan to scan it and beam up any life forms that they find there. On the planet, McCoy tells Kirk and Sulu that his tricorder doesn't really register anything when he examines Trelane. And Yeager notes that the fire in Trelane's fireplace, while it burns, it doesn't give off any heat. Kirk employs Trelane to let them go and finish their mission, but Trelane again refuses. Kirk mentions that the Enterprise has 400 men and women aboard, and Trelane is delighted at the prospect of bringing women down to his abode. Then they receive a signal from the Enterprise, which has managed to locate them, and they beam up despite Trelane's protests. On the bridge, Kirk orders them to leave orbit, but before they can leave, Trelane appears on the bridge, making a very Q-like appearance, you might say. He then beams all the bridge personnel back down to his home for a banquet. And he takes no immediate interest in Uhura and in Yeoman Ross, and is very charmed by them. Then Kirk manages to distract him by introducing him to Sulu. Hello, Adega. Hello, sir. Thanks for stopping by again. Always good to see you. So where was I? Okay. Yeah, so he speaks to Spock and he chides Spock for beaming them up earlier. And Spock has a great line here where he says, I object to you. I object to intellect without discipline. I object to power without constructive purpose. Really nice. But Trelane is more interested in the females, especially Yeoman Ross, who he invites to dance with him. He tells Uhura to play the harpsichord, but she says, I don't know how. Trelane says, of course you do. And then immediately she's suddenly able to play. Now, how being able to transfer matter and energy would cause him to be able to do that doesn't really add up, but, whatever, I guess. Okay, now McCoy notes that the food at the banquet and the wine doesn't have any taste to it, again suggesting that Trelane's knowledge and understanding of humans is kind of sketchy at best. Spock observes that Trelane is able to duplicate human forms, but not substance. Kirk suggests that since he's not all knowing, he can't be all powerful, and speculates that Trelane has some sort of device that is allowing him to do all these things. Kirk observes that Trelane never strays far from the large mirror on his wall. There we go. From the mirror on his wall, and Spock suggests that the mirror may be somehow connected to the use of his abilities. Kirk then confronts Trelane, forbidding Ross to dance with him and orders Trelane to leave his crewmen alone. He then slaps Trelane and challenges him to a duel, which delights Trelane to no end. He then produces a pair of dueling pistols. Trelane asserts the right to shoot first, which Kirk refuses, of course. He's like, no, we'll both shoot at the same time. But Trelane then threatens to shoot Spock if Kirk doesn't acquiesce. Kirk agrees, and Trelane fires first, but he raises his pistol and fires it harmlessly into the air. He then invites Kirk to shoot him, and he doesn't seem the least bit concerned about it. Then Kirk fires, but he fires at the mirror, destroying it and revealing the machine that provided Trelane's powers. Trelane is furious, but now that the machine is inoperative, they can contact the ship. Trelane tells them to go, and then he vanishes. So they beam up, and Kirk orders them to leave the system immediately. They warp away, but then discover a planet ahead of them. They veer away, but it keeps appearing no matter which course they take, and they realize that this planet is actually Gothos, which is basically chasing them. Kirk then decides that since they can't escape from the sky, he'll beam down alone and confront Trelane. He then appears in what appears to be some sort of a courtroom with Trelane presiding as the judge. He reads off a series of charges, treason, conspiracy, etc., and Kirk pleads guilty, but implores Trelane to let the Enterprise leave, which Trelane scoffs at, and he sentences Kirk to death by hanging. Kirk then chides Trelane for not taking the opportunity to experience the thrill and exhilaration of killing himself. And this prospect intrigues Trelane. Trelane then suggests a royal hunt in which he will chase Kirk down and kill him. Kirk agrees, but only if Trelane will let the Enterprise crew and the ship go, which Trelane reluctantly agrees to. He then transports Kirk outside of the home. Kirk tries to contact the Enterprise. He can't. Trelane then appears and chases after him. And there's a whole chase sequence where he's trying to contact the Enterprise, and Trelane keeps attacking him and trying to kill him, eventually chasing him back to the home, where he then traps Kirk by conjuring up some barred jail or prison bars. He closes in and then demands that Kirk fall to his knees and beg for his life. Kirk refuses. He then takes Trelane's sword away from him and breaks it and throws it away. Trelane gets very upset, saying that's not fair. Kirk can't do that. He's cheating. And then, of course, we get the big plot twist. They hear a strange voice speaking that scolds Trelane for misbehaving. Then we see these two glowing apparitions, and we realize that Trelane is basically a child of some sort of powerful alien race, and this has all basically been a game to him. They tell him that, what do they say? If you can't take care of your pets, you can't have them. you know and if you aren't if this is what you're going to do with a planet, then you won't be allowed to have it. It's time to come in. Trelane then gets into a childish tantrum and refuses, saying he was winning, it's not fair, he never gets to have any fun, etc., 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 till eventually he disappears. The beings then apologize to Kirk for the way their child behaved and tell him that he and his ship can leave. Kirk beams up to the Enterprise. Later, Spock approaches him and asks how they should categorize Trelane, noting that this is going to make an interesting log entry. And Kirk suggests they simply categorize him as a naughty child, since that's basically what he is. But then he says that really what Trelane did probably wasn't really, by human standards, wasn't all that different than tugging on girls' pigtails and various other pranks. And Spock is like, what the heck are you talking about? And Kirk realizes, oh, my mistake, Mr. Spock. I'm sure you never committed any childish pranks. And it ends there. And again, it's directed by Doug McDougall, written by Paul Schneider. Okay. So, writer Paul Schneider, on his follow up writing assignment for Balance of Terror, was nervous about this episode, which he describes as science fantasy. Other series that he had written for, such as Ben Casey, Mr. Novak, and The Big Valley, used conventional means of storytelling, but not this. And he was also late in delivering. Schneider had been tardy before when getting his first assignment to the Star Trek offices. His epic 32-page story outlining Balance of Terror also came in late. When Mary Black recalled, quote, he was a little late in delivering, not very late like Harlan Ellison was, but a little late. I had known what it was like to cover for John when he was late, so I was very familiar with how writers talk when they're making excuses. And Paul was going to be able to Paul came up with the most outrageous story. He told me that he wasn't going to be able to get the script in for another day or so. He said he was on his way in with it, and then the tire on his car blew out, and he was changing the tire, and the tire rolled down the hill across the highway, and he had to chase it. And well, it was all a wonderful story, except as I say, I was familiar with writers making excuses, so I knew that he was making this one up. He was a very nice man, but he wasn't a very good liar. When I mentioned it to John, he said, oh, well, the dog ate his homework. It's in the nature of writers that they're not good liars when it comes to their reasons for being late delivering. John Black added, quote, I liked his work. He was a sweet man and his work was good, but he was always late. Things hadn't changed since Balance of Terror. Along with the outline for Squire of Gothos, Schneider sent an apologetic letter to Gene Coon. Schneider borrowed from a classic for the ending of this episode. He later admitted, quote, the biggest problem was coming up with the climax. How do you end something like this? So I came up with using the ending for The Most Dangerous Game. The famous short story by Richard Connell involves a big game hunter who, bored with tracking conventional prey, decides to hunt down a human. The story was adapted into a movie, remade twice, and has been imitated often. In a memo to Kuhn, Robert Justman wrote, Paul Schneider was right. The story is fantasy. I'd leave it up to you whether or not you think this is the sort of story we want to do on Star Trek. Let's see here. It had been a very fast process getting the episode done. The episode was scheduled to begin production in 7 days, but as had happened with Court Martial, no one thought of keeping NBC in the loop. Gene Coon, upon taking over as producer, had assumed Roddenberry would deal with the network. Roddenberry, tired of butting heads with the NBC suits, had expected that Coon would do it. As a result of the lack of communication and the wrong assumptions, Roddenberry and Coon collectively dropped the ball. With NBC production manager Stan Robertson rightfully irked, he wrote to Coon, we understand the errors which led to our receiving this script just a week before its planned shooting date without ever having received an outline. However, in the future, I would remind you, as we discussed, of the inherent danger apparent in this sort of thing occurring. Robertson didn't like how Trelane was portrayed in a farcical manner instead of more serious. He didn't think much of The Most Dangerous Game ending either. Robertson was thinking of Kirk tracking and fighting Gary Mitchell in where no man had gone before and chasing and fighting Finnegan and that sort of thing. Trelane hunting Kirk was certainly a different kettle of fish, but to Robertson's thinking, it was still a fish of a sort. But on this occasion, Stan Robertson had underestimated the audience. The irony was rich, the surprise a delight. But because of NBC's concerns, Gene Coon did one further script polish, snipping out a few things and clarifying a few others. Okay, Don McDougal, who had directed 26 episodes of The Roy Rogers Show, 20 episodes of Johnny Weissmuller's Jungle Jim, 39 episodes of Robert Culp's Trackdown, and 20 episodes of Steve McQueen's Wanted Dead or Alive, and 31 episodes of Bonanza, was brought in for his one and only episode of Star Trek. For Trelane, McDougal and casting director Joe DaGosta wanted Roddy McDowell, and Gene Coon had someone else in mind, William Campbell, who appeared in an episode that he had produced for The Wild Wild West. I can definitely see Roddy McDowell playing that character. He probably would have been pretty good at it. I don't know if he'd been as good as Campbell, though. Campbell, who was 39 at the time, had been gaining attention with prominent billing and big screen hits like Escape from Fort Bravo, Man Without a Star, Backlash, and Love Me Tender, among others. He was known for playing contemporary punks and thugs, not flamboyant characters teetering between maliciousness and comical innocence. Regardless, after reading the script, Campbell knew he could handle the part. Quote, "It was a fantastic character," Campbell said. "It would be very easy for any actor who had any training to play the Squire of Gothos. The character was so well written, and of course, it was the show." After Campbell recited only a few lines of dialogue to Don McDougal and Joe DaGosta, Roddy McDowell was out and Campbell was told to report to wardrobe. Richard Carlisle, as Lieutenant Carl Yeager, was 46. He had appeared over 100 times before the camera and had his own short-lived series in the 50s called Crime Photographer. Vanita Wolf, making her television debut as Yeoman Teresa Ross, replacing Yeoman Rand in this episode, was a model and a former beauty contest winner. Following this, she was featured as the cover girl on the July 1967 issue of Playboy magazine, and then she married a wealthy nightclub owner and she left show business. Michael Barrier made 3 appearances on Star Trek as Lieutenant Vincent DeSalle. This would be the first. He would return again in This Side of Paradise and Cat's Paw. Barbara Babcock, who is 29, was 29, provided the voice of Trelane's mother. She would return for more voiceover work in Assignment Earth, The Tholian Web, and The Lights of Zetar, and would also have on-camera roles in A Taste for Armageddon and Plato's Stepchildren. Her most famous role, though, was 15 Years Away, playing Grace Gardner on the show Hill Street Blues, for which she would win an Emmy. James Doohan said he made dual appearances in this episode, on camera and on the soundtrack. Some sources credit the voice of Trelane's father as belonging to Barton LaRue, and for good reason. It sounds very much like LaRue. The popular voice actor would indeed voice work for Star Trek in 4 upcoming episodes, but this time the producers may have looked closer to home. That would also give them an excuse to allow Doohan to appear in Squire. Eddie Paskey as Lieutenant Leslie got his first turn in the command chair. You can see him briefly as he vacates the seat and makes way for Kirk after the captain returns to the ship towards the end of Act 3. William Campbell recalled that Gene Coon proved to be awfully fair over a dispute during filming. The problem occurred when a wig that Campbell was to wear arrived. The Squire was to be dressed as an old world English barrister who pronounces judgment on Kirk. They started that scene late in the day, Campbell said. They called for the wig, and the makeup person comes over and puts it on, and I looked like Shirley Temple. It was a French period wig, very curly and full. I immediately told them, "You've got the wrong type of wig." And I remember Bill Shatner had been working his blank off, and he came over and said, "What difference does it make? Nobody's going to know that." And I said, "It does make a difference to me. It's not only a difference in the acting that I would do, but it isn't the right type of wig." Don McDougal was now put in the awkward position of taking sides with either the star of the series or a guest performer. McDougal chose not to have an opinion. Wise move. Next, Gene Coon was called to the set. Campbell said Gene didn't take 2 seconds to say, "Campbell's right, get another wig, just work on another sequence," which is exactly what we did, and it didn't hold anything up. That's the kind of guy he was. He was very sensitive about the quality of the show and how it was done, unquote. That other sequence was the beam down of McCoy, DeSalle, and Yeager in the woodsy area outside Trelane's castle. The company then returned to Trelane's drawing room for the mock trial, this time with the proper wig. William Shatner, being chased by the sword-wielding Campbell, had a stuntman to take the falls for him. Campbell didn't, since Trelane had no falls that were actually planned in the script. Campbell, however, thought it would be a good idea if his character also took a spill at some point. But this presented a problem. The ground on a sound stage, no matter what else it appears to be, is actually made of concrete. When Campbell fell, his shoulder popped out of joint, resulting in a further delay in production as a doctor had to be called in to reset his shoulder. And this resulted in an unplanned seventh day of filming that wouldn't wrap until 7:15 p.m. Despite steering clear of the argument between Campbell and Shatner and doing a first-rate job of directing, McDougal would not be invited back to Star Trek again. The music for this episode was effectively recycled from past episodes. One nice touch on the part of sound editor Doug Grindstaff was adding a musical cue from The Man Trap just as McCoy looks at the salt vampire on display in Trelane's drawing room. It is kind of odd that, McCoy doesn't show any recognition. He's like, "That, what that thing." It was the same cue used in the former episode whenever the creature in the guise of a crew member on the Enterprise lurked about the ship. The final price tag for this episode was $194,573. This was $9,573 over the studio's new reduced per allowance episode allowance. The cash surplus was gone, and Star Trek was now back at a deficit again. Now, this episode aired initially on January 12th, 1967. In the first half hour, it came in second in the ratings with a 29% or 29.6% audience share behind Bewitched. And the second half hour also came in second, this time behind the Thursday Night Movie with a 31.6% audience share. Stan Robertson fretted over whether the Squire of Gothos would be accepted and understood by the viewing audience. There had been no reason to worry. The episode and the character of Trelane proved to be immensely popular. Yes, it did. Yeah, so this is definitely one of the best Star Trek episodes. It's a lot of fun, but also clever. And definitely, I give it an A+. It's just one of the best. I really like it. William Campbell said, quote, "In my lifetime, I met maybe 5 people I found impossible to dislike, and strangely enough, 2 of those were on Star Trek, DeForest Kelley and Gene Coon." Interesting. There's another actor he fails to mention, the one that he did the most work with. I'm not implying anything. As for the episode itself, Campbell said, quote, "It was just a great role. It was sensational. I will never forget it." Okay, so I guess what am I at? Wow, this one's quick, just 32 minutes. So I'll go ahead and wrap this one up. I will be back next week, and next week is a personal favorite of mine. Episode 19 in production order, Arena, which that one will be a lot of fun to cover. And let's see what else. Oh, okay, I forgot to mention. So I'm going to be I don't think it's not this Saturday, but the Saturday after that, August 2nd, I will be appearing on J-Man's channel. If you don't know who J-Man, he is a YouTuber. Let me get his link. Throw it up here. I will be appearing on J-Man's channel for a live stream. And in this live stream, let's see, yeah, here it is. And I'll throw this in the comments. That is J-Man's channel if you want to check it out. The very end was too much like the previous one, a C for me, because it just ends too abruptly, maybe too convenient. I mean, I see what you mean. But I don't know. I find it enjoyable enough. I'm okay with it. I just think this one's more clever. But hey, to each his taste. And so for this live stream, we will be covering or discussing the Squadron Supreme, specifically the 12 issue limited series that Marvel published back in the mid 80s. Can I bring this up here? Eh. Eh. Well, that's not really coming up well. All right, never mind. Anyway, we will be discussing the first 6 issues of that series, and then at some date after that, I guess probably a week later, we'll be doing another live stream to discuss the final 6 episodes of that series. It's a personal favorite of mine. When I first started reading Marvel, they were doing a story in the Avengers that involved the Squadron Supreme. So they've always been a bit of a favorite of mine. And I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope you will take the time to check that out. Where is it here? Let me bring it up. Yeah. Yeah, there they are. So the Squadron Supreme, if you don't know, they are basically a Marvel version of the Justice League. And they back then they existed on a parallel Earth and a parallel universe. Now, I think after their big Secret Wars crossover back around 2015, the Squadron Supreme is now part, or the characters are now part of the mainstream Marvel Earth, I guess. But this will be the first title that really ever bore their name. Back then, they had only done appearances in Avengers. So I'm looking forward to that. Hope you will check that out. And I guess I'll probably live stream Sunday evening. And so I've had a lot of success with my Thundar the Barbarian trailer on my channel. Can I bring that up? It's done really well. I'm now I just passed 1,600 subs, I think yesterday. And the trailer at this point is closing in on 140,000 views. So it's been really successful for me. I'm definitely going to be doing more of these AI trailers. I've got a couple I'm working on right now. Hopefully, I'll have something out here in the next week or two. And I guess that's going to be it for now. So thanks to everyone who tuned in for the stream. And if you haven't, please do like this stream and before you leave, and sub to the channel if you haven't. And I will see you all, I guess, this weekend. Have a good. Oh, and also, of course, I'll be. I think I'll be on the comic book roundtable tomorrow night with Stone Loki's channel with him and 24-Hour Fusion and some other folks. And I hope you'll check that out as well. And until then, have a good evening.